Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
I hold the photograph in my trembling hand, the same hand I've been trying to steady all afternoon. The edges of the picture are frayed, and there's a small crease across the corner where I once bent it in anger. Still, I never threw it away. It shows me and Sarah Johnson standing at the edge of Lake Michigan, that wide expanse of water behind us. She leans on my shoulder and smiles into the camera. The sun is bright on her hair. My arm is draped across her waist. It's a moment of warmth, so naive it almost hurts to look at. I can't tear my eyes off it, though. I stand here, in a dingy rented room a few miles from everything I once called home, gripping that snapshot so tight my knuckles show white. I try to breathe, but the air in my lungs is cold, stale. Seems like I've been breathing stale air forever. Outside, I hear cars rumbling, horns blaring. It's afternoon rush hour, a chaotic swirl of engines and impatience. But in here, in this cramped space, there's only silence. Silence and the photograph. And me. A year ago, I was sure of who I was. Michael Johnson, construction project manager, 42, from Chicago. Husband of Sarah Johnson. We had a house in a quiet Ohio neighborhood, a safe place. We had dreams. Now I don't know what I have except old ghosts and a place where the rent is cheap, the bed is lumpy, and the blinds don't quite close. I slide my thumb across Sarah Johnson's face in that photo, feeling the memory as if it's gritty under my skin. I should have deleted it. I should have taken the digital version that lives in my phone and pressed the trash icon. But I never did. I never managed to. Maybe part of me is still stuck on that shoreline, the moment the photo was snapped, back when I believed marriage was a fortress, back when her betrayal was a concept that would have seemed absurd. Now I know better. My phone vibrates on the table, rattling over the chipped veneer. It's probably her again. It's always her at this time of day, as if Sarah Johnson has me penciled in like a recurring appointment. She calls, I ignore, or I answer and speak a single syllable. Yes, no, yes, no. That's all I can manage these days, all I want to say. Because there's something about hearing her voice that unravels me, something that slices through whatever defenses I've built. But I can't let it get that far, can't let her voice coil around my guilt or my anger, because I'm done being the man who begs for answers. I was that man once. I can't be him again. I walk to the window. The street below is busy. Men and women hurrying home. Buses wheezing by, sirens in the distance. The noise seeps through the glass, but in this stale room I barely feel it. My hand is still clenched around the photograph, my knuckles throbbing with the effort. It all started with a single, stupid detail. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't come with a big sign or a dramatic reveal. Sometimes, it's a small thing. For me, it was a cardboard box, a box I didn't recognize, big enough for personal items. Our neighbor, old Mr. Lambert, mumbled something about seeing Sarah carry it out one afternoon. He assumed she was shipping a present for me. I laughed it off, but I knew she hadn't mentioned any packages. And the way she acted later, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. God, I still remember that day. I'd come home early from the site, dusty and tired. The front door was unlocked. The house smelled like a mixture of coffee and perfume. At the time, it didn't strike me as odd, but in hindsight, it's like a warning sign I ignored. Sarah Johnson appeared at the end of the hallway with the laundry basket in her arms and that box just behind her on the floor. She smiled at me, a tight smile, forced. When I asked her what was in the box, she just said, "It's nothing. Stuff for work." A half lie, or maybe a quarter lie. I tried to brush it off, because I was the trusting type, the reliable type. I put in the hours at my job. I paid bills on time. I kept the yard neat. I was the man who believed that you marry once and stay that way forever. I was the man who looked the other way when that tightness in my chest told me something was off. I guess I thought love made us immune to betrayal, but soon the small details began to add up. The hush in her voice, the text messages she'd answer only in another room, the mention of a certain David from it, who was such a big help with her marketing projects. I let my suspicion gnaw at me from within, unsure how to confront the possibility that Sarah Johnson, my wife, could be lying. The last time we touched intimately, I remember her turning away afterward, like she had somewhere else to be. And I told myself we were just tired. Then came that night I got off work earlier than usual. I parked a block away, habit from when the driveway was full of construction materials, and walked home. The street was mostly quiet, just a few cars. I remember hearing the faint hum of the air conditioning unit as I stepped up to the door, my boots leaving dusty prints on the porch. I turned the knob, unlocked again. The living room was still, the overhead light switched off. But from upstairs, I heard something, a low sound, laughter, and then her voice, soft but carrying. "We shouldn't." That was Sarah Johnson's voice, only she didn't sound like the Sarah I knew. There was a tremor of excitement, or guilt, or both. Then I heard his voice, quieter, urging something I couldn't make out, but the tone was intimate. She gave a breathy laugh that didn't belong to my wife, more like a woman in the middle of passion. The kind of laughter you share with someone when you believe no one else can hear. I should have turned around, should have fled like a coward. But I couldn't. My heart was pounding in my ears, my gut twisting. I still had my jacket on. It felt like a weight around my shoulders. Step by step, I moved up the stairs, the old floorboards creaking under me. My mouth was dry, and my pulse hammered so loud I thought they'd hear me. Thought they'd know I was there, witnessing it. When I reached the landing, I saw the bedroom door was half open, a slice of light cutting across the hallway. I edged closer, and that's when I saw them. Sarah Johnson, half-dressed, her hair tumbled around her shoulders, her blouse unbuttoned, her body pressed close to someone else. That was David, the man from her work. I didn't know much about him then, but I learned enough in those few seconds. They were on the bed, sheets twisted around them. The faint lamplight revealed the gleam of sweat on their arms. And the way she clung to him, the way her face looked, her lips parted, her eyes half-lidded, there was no mistaking the betrayal. My stomach lurched. It wasn't just that I saw them physically close. It was the intimacy in how she touched him, how she laughed. A certain softness in her voice that I'd craved for months, but she'd given it to him instead. They were so absorbed in each other. They didn't notice me. I heard him whisper, "I can't help it, Sarah. You're God. You're amazing." And she answered with a soft moan, a sound I'd never heard from her lips. My chest hurt so badly I thought I might actually pass out. I pushed the door open. Maybe it was the need to make them see me. Maybe it was something primal, a demand that they face the truth. The door creaked, and they froze. She sat up, eyes wide. David scrambled, grabbing for the sheet, but the raw shock was all over their faces. Sarah Johnson's hair was tangled, her blouse falling off one shoulder, revealing the strap of her bra. Her cheeks were flushed, and her gaze locked on me. I wanted to scream, to rage, to do something violent, but I didn't. My body went cold. We stared at each other. For the briefest second, no one spoke. Then David started stammering something. I remember him saying my name, Michael, man, but I just raised my hand to shut him up. Sarah Johnson scrambled for the covers, trying to fix her blouse, her voice faltering. I could see the utter fear in her eyes. I turned around and walked out. I didn't punch him, didn't scream at her. I just left. Downstairs, the living room was dim. The lamp on the side table flickered. My boots clicked on the hardwood floor. For a second, I paused at the front door, my shoulders trembling, my breath coming in ragged gulps. Then I opened the door and stepped out into the quiet suburban street. A few neighbors were out on their porches, clueless, the late summer breeze stirring the leaves. I heard a distant dog barking. My ears were ringing so loudly that I couldn't even process the normalcy around me. That was the day my life as I knew it ended. That's the shock that keeps replaying in my head. Over and over. I see her face. Over and over. I hear her soft laughter. I left everything behind that night, my dignity included. Took only the bag I always kept in the trunk of my car. For a week, I slept in cheap motels, refusing to answer her calls. Then I started drifting, picking up freelance jobs here and there, sending an occasional check to keep up with half the mortgage. Stupid, I know, but it felt like a responsibility I couldn't abandon even if I wanted to. Meanwhile, Sarah Johnson tried texting, calling, emailing. I didn't want to hear her voice. I was too raw, too broken. That was a year ago. In that time, I learned how quickly a man can become a ghost. I lost contact with my few close friends. My phone was mostly silent except for her messages. I started eating alone in diners, wearing the same jacket day and night, sometimes sleeping in it, because it felt safer that way, like I could leave any time if I needed to, because I had nightmares about walking into some new place and finding another betrayal. As if my entire reality had turned into a cracked mirror, reflecting ugliness where I once saw trust. I worked odd construction gigs across different counties, leaving when I got restless or the job ended. I never stayed anywhere long enough to form attachments. Some nights, I just drove for hours, across highways and back roads, until I found a rest stop or a cheap motel with blinking neon lights. My only companion was that photograph in my wallet, the one that wouldn't let me forget. Because even though I hated her, I couldn't erase her. Even though I wanted to believe I was done with the past, I clung to that image of a happier time, like some twisted anchor. Then one day, she found me. I was at a late-night diner off I-75, near an old truck stop. It was raining outside, the patter on the windows steady and lulling. I just finished a plate of greasy eggs and was sipping bitter coffee, my gaze fixed on nothing. The place was nearly empty, a couple of truckers at the counter, a waitress wiping tables. And then the door chimed. My stomach dropped. Sarah Johnson stood there, looking small in her long coat, soaked hair clinging to her face. I felt it in my gut first, a wrenching twist of recognition. She came over to my booth, eyes red like she'd been crying for hours. I didn't speak. She just slid in across from me, slowly, tentatively. I had this urge to stand and leave, but some part of me was rooted to that vinyl seat. "Michael," she began. Her voice trembled. I've been searching for you everywhere." I stared at the black coffee in front of me, swirling it in the cup. She swallowed hard. "I know what I did. I'm not here to pretend it didn't happen. I need you to know how sorry I am. Please, talk to me." Silence. I raised my head to look at her. God, she looked hollow. The Sarah Johnson I knew was always polished, always so put together. This version of her had dark circles under her eyes, hair limp from the rain, shoulders hunched like she'd been carrying a mountain of guilt. I felt something twist inside me, a flicker of pity, maybe. But there was also anger. "Michael, please," she whispered, voice barely audible. It took me a moment, but I answered. "No." That single word made her flinch. She set her hands on the table, twisted her fingers together. "At least, let me explain." I gave a slow shake of my head. Then I said, "No." She blinked back tears, letting out a shaky breath. Her nails dug into her palms. The waitress came by, asked if everything was okay. I nodded absently. The waitress gave me a strange look, but Sarah Johnson didn't even glance her way. "You must hate me," she said softly. I just took a sip of coffee. Then I breathed in, forcing my voice not to tremble. "Yes." Her lips parted like she wanted to protest, but no words came. She looked away, tears sliding down her cheeks. Outside, the rain battered the windows. I stared at her face, the same face that once filled me with warmth. Now it only conjured the image of her half-naked in our bedroom with David. My mouth tightened. I set my coffee down, reached into my wallet. For a second, My fingers touched that old photograph, hidden in the billfold. I almost pulled it out, almost showed her how I still carried it. But I didn't. Instead, I grabbed a few bills, tossed them on the table, and slid out of the booth. She made a desperate motion to reach for my arm, but I stepped away before she could. She stood up too. "Wait, please, I can't." Her breath hitched, and she tried again. "I can't do this on my own. I made a mistake. I need you, Michael." The way she said my name, like it could somehow crack my defenses, made my stomach churn. I looked at her one last time. I managed to force out a single word. "No." Then I turned and left the diner. The door slammed shut behind me, muffling whatever she tried to say next. Outside, the night was alive with the hush of rain. The truck stop lights flickered in the distance, and a few cars whooshed by on the highway. I stood there, drenched, feeling the water soak through my clothes, but it didn't matter. I'd felt dead for so long that the cold barely registered. After that night, I kept moving. Part of me hoped I'd never see her again, that I could just go on drifting until the pain dulled. But she found me again a few months later. It was like she had a radar for my presence. Maybe she hired someone to track me down. I never asked. Each time, she tried to talk, tried to elaborate, to beg. Each time, I answered only with yes or no. It drove her insane. I could see it in her eyes, like she wanted to shake me and scream, ask me how I could be so cruel. But I didn't care. Because I was no longer that good man she remembered. Something in me had gone cold. The version of me who would listen to pleas or confessions was gone, and I intended to keep it that way. I recall a day I was sleeping in my car near the outskirts of Columbus. I heard a soft knock on my window and woke up to see her outside, face drawn in worry. My heart did that old lurch again, but I just stared at her, my face expressionless. She gestured for me to roll down the window. I did, but only a few inches. "Michael," she breathed, "are you living in your car?" I gave a stiff nod. Yes. Her eyes welled up with tears. "God, why? Let me help you. Let me at least get you a room more." "No." She looked like she wanted to argue, but the weight of my refusal silenced her. I remember her stepping back from the car, hugging herself, tears falling silently. I started the engine, and she leaped aside so I wouldn't run over her feet. As I pulled out, I glanced in the rearview mirror, saw her standing there like a statue in the empty lot. A part of me felt something close to guilt, but the rest of me was numb. Time drifted in a haze. I'd do a job or two, get enough money for a cheap place, stay until the nightmares returned, then move on. In my quiet moments, I'd remember small things. The smell of Sarah Johnson's perfume, the sound of her laughter in that bedroom with him, the hope in her eyes when she tried to talk to me. And also the hateful rage in my gut that had no true release. I kept that rage cage, swallowing it every day, letting it fester. Somewhere along the way, I found a kind of twisted clarity. She'd left me emotionally long before I walked in on them. I was just too blind to see it. She fell for David because I wasn't enough. Maybe that's an ugly truth, but I clung to it, because it reminded me of how the world really works. People leave. Love fails. I slept with my jacket on most nights. The pockets stuffed with scraps of my old life. Receipts, a few pictures, postcards from places Sarah and I once visited. I never had the courage to get rid of those remnants, but I also couldn't bear to look at them for too long. Eventually, though, I got tired. Tired of being half alive, half dead. Tired of seeing Sarah Johnson's tear-streaked face whenever she found me. Tired of the constant ache in my chest. It was a slow realization, but it came. Either this pain would swallow me completely, or I would have to choose to keep walking forward, away from her, not just physically, but emotionally. So I found a small place in a quieter part of the state, a modest construction job that gave me enough to cover rent. I tried to rebuild some semblance of routine, and that's where she finally cornered me with her big speech. It was late afternoon. I was inside my new apartment, leaning against the kitchen counter, waiting for the coffee to brew. Outside, the traffic noise was faint. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it. Sarah Johnson's name. I was about to ignore it, but something in me stirred, and I answered. Silence on the line. Then her voice came. Michael, I need to see you. Please. I said nothing at first. Then, quietly. No. I know, she said, a tremor in her tone. I know that's all you say now. But I'm here outside. I'm not leaving until you speak to me. A swirl of emotions passed through me. Anger, fatigue, a bitter resignation. Through the blinds, I saw her silhouette near my battered old pickup. She looked smaller than I remembered. I ended the call, took a breath, and walked out into the autumn air. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. You followed me again, I said, voice hoarse. Yes, she said softly. She wore a dark coat, her hair pinned back. She looked older, lines of stress around her mouth. I braced myself, arms crossed. You want something? She nodded, blinking rapidly. I want to talk. Inside, if you'd let me. I stared at her, silent. After a moment, I jerked my head toward the building. She followed me up the narrow stairs. The entire time, neither of us spoke a word. Her shoes clicked on the steps. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. We reached my door, and I led her inside. She took in the bare living space, the small kitchen, the single sagging couch. No pictures, no decorations. I closed the door behind her, leaving us in a stillness that weighed like a lead blanket. She turned to face me. Michael, speak, I said, my jaw tight. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then exhaled. I don't know how to begin. I know I hurt you. I destroyed what we had. But I can't move on without at least trying to make amends. I said nothing. Outside, a motorcycle roared by, then faded into the distance. I don't love him, she blurted. I never really did. It was a mistake. He gave me attention. I felt lonely. You were always working. Her voice broke, tears shining in her eyes. I was stupid. I was selfish. I've never stopped loving you, no matter how it seems. I forced myself to remain stone-faced. My lips felt dry. No. Her eyebrows drew together. No, you don't believe me. Or no, you don't love me. No. She put a hand over her mouth, stifling a sob. I want to fix this. Please, just give me a chance to prove. No, I repeated. She let out a frustrated sound, tears carving paths down her cheeks. Why won't you let me explain? Why won't you talk to me like a human being? I stared at her, fighting the swirl of bitterness in my gut. A dozen angry words clogged my throat, but my vow held. Sarah Johnson was the one who chose to rip our marriage apart. She was the one who gave her warmth to someone else. I owed her nothing. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I've lost you forever, haven't I? I stood there, arms crossed, the silence pressing in on us. Her shoulders shook. Finally, she lifted her gaze to mine, eyes pleading. Tell me what to do, she whispered. Whatever you want, I'll do it. If you want me gone, I'll go. If you want me to sign divorce papers today, I will. I'm done lying. I just can't carry this guilt anymore. That made me flinch. Divorce. I'd avoided the legalities, probably out of some leftover sense of disbelief. But the idea was like a cold knife. Final. Real. Before I could speak, she looked around, noticing how barren my apartment was. Her voice came out husky. You're not living, Michael. You're existing. I made that happen. I hate myself for it. I swallowed, feeling a lump in my throat. Her words sank in, echoing in my mind. You're not living. And she was right. For a year, I'd been a walking corpse. The pain was still there, maybe always would be. But at some point, I had to face what was left of my life. I couldn't keep clinging to the ghost of what might have been. I walked to the window, looked down at the street. Cars rushed by, their headlights a dull shimmer in the early evening gloom. My reflection stared back from the glass, a man I scarcely recognized. Shoulders tense, eyes haunted. I was done being that man. The question was, what came next? Sarah Johnson's voice pulled me back. I miss you. I miss us. I turned, my mouth forming a bitter line. For the first time in over a year, I spoke more than a single word to her. There is no us anymore, Sarah Johnson. She blinked, tears on her lashes. I know, she whispered. But can't we? No. My voice cracked, but my conviction held. We can't rebuild something that died the moment you let him into our bed. You killed it. It can't be resurrected. She stared at me, stricken. Then she stood up unsteadily, crossing the small space between us. I saw the flicker in her eyes, like she might reach out, touch me. But she didn't. She stopped inches away, breathing rapidly. I would do anything to change the past. You can't. Her shoulders sagged. I know. We stood there, the tension almost tangible, the hum of the outside world a muffled backdrop. In the silence, I felt an odd calm, like stepping into a cold wind that tears your breath away but clarifies everything. She was there, raw and vulnerable, and I no longer wanted her. I no longer recognized her as the woman I'd once cherished. All that remained was an empty shell of a marriage, and my resolute will to walk on alone. I stepped back. She opened her mouth again, but I lifted a hand to forestall her. The final shred of pity in my voice came through. Go. Just go. She hesitated, tears shimmering. She must have seen the finality in my face, because after a moment, she nodded, swallowing hard. I'll go, she said quietly. If that's what you want. Yes. She gave me one last, sorrowful glance. Then she moved toward the door, her footsteps painfully slow, like she was giving me time to stop her. But I didn't. She opened it, stepped out into the hallway. The door closed behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo in the still apartment. I pressed my forehead against the window, exhaling shakily. A swirl of emotion pulsed in my chest. Anger, relief, sadness, all at once. But underneath it all was something colder. Acceptance. I could never return to who I was before. That version of Michael Johnson died the day I found Sarah with another man. I sank onto the couch, ignoring the lingering scent of her perfume. A minute passed, maybe 5. Then I stood, rummaged in the kitchen drawer until I found a small stone I kept. Smooth, heavy, the size of my palm. I'd picked it up months ago on a random walk. I used to carry it in my jacket as a weird reminder that I wasn't ready to let go of the pain. I pressed the stone to my chest, feeling the cool surface against my skin. The next few weeks were quiet. She didn't come back. I didn't change my phone number, but I stopped replying to her attempts to contact me. She kept sending texts, leaving voicemails, asking me to reconsider, telling me she was leaving Ohio, that she'd gotten a job offer somewhere else. I deleted those messages unopened. At night, I stared at the ceiling, the photograph of us at Lake Michigan folded on my bedside table. Over time, I realized I wasn't having nightmares as much. Maybe a part of me had begun to heal. But healing doesn't happen without a cost. My rage turned into something else, something sharper and more precise. At some point, a desire for closure ignited in me. Maybe revenge is too strong a word. Or maybe it isn't. I just knew I needed to exorcise that final demon. David, the man who took what was mine. The man who took Sarah Johnson's laughter away from me. I needed to face him. I learned he was still around, still working at that IT consultancy. My old friend from the construction site, Tim, provided me with some gossip. He's making big money, but I hear things with your wife didn't last, Tim said awkwardly, uncertain if he should share more. I only nodded, letting the information sink in. David was single again, living the high life with no real consequences. Something about that made my blood boil. I spent nights thinking about how to confront him. Would I corner him in a parking lot? Show up at his office? Part of me wanted to break his face, to drive my fist into his jaw until he felt a fraction of the pain that had hollowed me out. But a cooler part of me insisted that violence wouldn't fix anything, wouldn't bring me any real relief. What I needed was to see him look at me and remember that the life he touched was not some disposable fling. That in betraying me, he had also betrayed himself, in a way. Eventually, I found him one evening. I'd parked across the street from his office building, waiting. Hours went by. Finally, he stepped out. Tall, well-groomed, carrying a sleek messenger bag. He didn't notice me. The street was busy, people rushing home. The hum of traffic gave me cover. I followed him to a small bar. He took a seat at the counter, ordered a drink. I waited in the shadows of the booth near the back, sipping water. He chatted idly with the bartender, glancing at his phone from time to time. The air smelled of stale beer and peanuts. My heart pounded. When he turned on his stool and noticed me, his jaw went slack. Our eyes locked. I stood and approached, my footsteps echoing in the mostly empty bar. He started to speak. "Michael." I stopped a few feet away, arms stiff at my sides. The bartender glanced our way, but we didn't cause a scene. David swallowed, sliding off the stool. "Look, man, I'm sorry. I never meant." I lifted a hand, palm out. "Don't talk. Just listen." He licked his lips nervously. "Okay." I drew a breath. My voice came out low and rough. "You thought you could have my wife, no consequences. Maybe you told yourself it wasn't your fault. Maybe you told yourself we were having problems anyway. Let me guess. You said anything to soothe your conscience." He didn't respond, but I saw the guilt flicker in his eyes. I leaned in, quietly enough that the bartender couldn't overhear. "You tore my life apart. And I'm not sure how to make you understand the price of that. Part of me wants to slam your head into this counter until you can't stand. Another part of me wants to just walk away and never think of you again." David held up his hands, a gesture of surrender. "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. But I swear, it ended between me and Sarah. I didn't mean to hurt anybody. I just—" "Shut up," I said softly. "Do you understand that you broke something inside me? That you took a marriage I believed in and made it a joke?" He nodded, eyes flickering to the bartender, who was now preoccupied with wiping glasses. Then he looked back to me. "Yes," he whispered. "I do." "Good," I said. My hand curled into a fist. I felt the stone's weight in my jacket pocket, pressing against my side. "Because that's the only reason I'm not beating you senseless right now. I want you to live with it. Every time you look at another man's wife, remember me. Remember that what you took wasn't just some casual fling. You took a piece of a man's soul." He swallowed hard. "I understand. I'm sorry." I stared at him for a moment, letting that anger burn in my eyes. Then I straightened. Slowly, I exhaled. "Don't ever come near me again," I said. "Or Sarah Johnson. If you do, I swear I'll—" He nodded, panic creeping into his expression. "I won't," he assured me. "Good." My voice was flat. Then I turned and walked out of that bar, my steps echoing. Outside, the air felt electric. Cars whooshed by, headlights glaring. A couple huddled near the entrance, laughing together. I tasted the night air, let it fill my lungs. For the first time in so long, something shifted in my chest, like I had taken back a bit of my dignity, or maybe found a piece of closure. I didn't feel joy, but I felt relief. I walked until I reached my truck, got inside, and just sat there, staring at the steering wheel. The image of David's guilt-ridden face hovered in my mind. The tension in my shoulders slowly eased. My heart still pounded, but I breathed through it. I opened the glove compartment and took out that photograph. Yes, I'd moved it from my wallet to the glove box some time ago, hoping to forget it. Under the yellow glow of the overhead light, I studied that old image, me and Sarah Johnson, back when everything was simple, back when I believed I was the luckiest man in the world. I pressed my thumb against her smiling face, then closed my eyes. My breathing steadied. Carefully, deliberately, I folded the photograph once more and placed it back in the glove box. In the weeks that followed, I changed. Something in me began to stir back to life. I slept without nightmares. I took more hours at the construction job, saving money to move somewhere better. The quiet rage I'd lived with for a year receded. I found myself standing a little straighter, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin again. It was subtle, but it was real. One day, Sarah Johnson knocked on my door again. I opened it to see her standing there, eyes searching mine. There was a finality in her gaze. She held an envelope. "I filed the papers," she said. Her voice trembled. "I signed everything. It's just waiting for your signature if that's what you want." I looked at her, this woman I once adored. My heart gave a painful twist, but the tears that threatened didn't fall. She held out the envelope. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I took it from her hand. "Michael," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I'll keep saying it for the rest of my life." I met her gaze. "No more," I said quietly. "You've said enough." Her face crumpled. She nodded, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes. "If you ever want to talk." "No." She closed her eyes, a sob escaping her lips. Then she walked away. As she left, I stared at her retreating form, feeling neither anger nor pity, just emptiness, and maybe the smallest flicker of acceptance. I closed the door and set the envelope on my kitchen table. That night, I signed the papers. A cold calm washed over me. I was done. My pen moved across the dotted line, my signature marking the official end of what we once were. I left them there, on the table, for a few days. A quiet part of me wondered if I should reconsider. But no. I sealed the envelope and mailed it. When I dropped it in the mailbox, my pulse thudded with the realization. I was truly free, in a way. But freedom doesn't always mean happiness. It just means an absence of chains. Time passed. The divorce became final. I found a better apartment, a slightly better job managing a construction crew. I no longer slept in my jacket. The nightmares came less often, replaced by a dull ache of memory. Sometimes, late at night, I took out that stone from my pocket and set it on my bedside table, reminding myself that I survived. And maybe that stone was my heart now. Heavy, unyielding, but still mine. One evening, I heard a soft knock at my door. My heart clenched. I almost ignored it, expecting Sarah Johnson again. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw a different face. A neighbor, someone from the building. I opened the door cautiously. It was a woman who lived down the hall, a teacher, if I remembered correctly. She wore a gentle smile and held out a piece of misdelivered mail. We got to talking, just polite conversation about the landlord, about how the lights in the hallway sometimes flickered. Her name was Rachel. Something in her tone was warm, unthreatening, like she saw the weariness in my eyes and accepted it. We ended up chatting for an hour in the hallway. It was the longest conversation I'd had with anyone outside of the ghost of my marriage. It felt strange, almost disorienting, to speak freely, to share small facts about my day. By the end, I felt a cautious spark, a reminder that life could hold more than endless regret. She gave a small laugh about something I said, and I realized I hadn't made someone laugh in ages. A subtle but important victory. After she left, I closed my door. My gaze fell on the stone on the counter. I picked it up, felt its cool solidity. For a year, I carried my bitterness like a weight. For a year, I used single-word answers to keep everything and everyone at bay. Now maybe it was time to let that go. I walked to the window, listening to the hum of distant traffic. The sun was setting, painting the sky in dusky pinks and oranges. Below, the street was alive with people heading home. Some carried groceries, others walked dogs. A normal evening in a normal town. I held that stone in my hand and slowly lowered it, set it down on the windowsill. I didn't need it pressed against my chest anymore. I won't pretend my scars are gone. I won't pretend I've forgiven Sarah Johnson, or that I have illusions about the permanence of love. But I can say I'm still breathing. Not just inhaling and exhaling, but living. And that, I think, is enough. People talk about closure like it's a clean break, but it isn't. It's more like a long bruise that fades in slow increments, or a shadow that shrinks with the shifting sun. I still wake up sometimes with a start, hearing the echo of that bedroom scene. I still find myself wincing when I see a couple holding hands on the sidewalk, but I don't feel hollow anymore. The emptiness is no longer a yawning pit. It's just a quiet ache that reminds me what I've lost and who I've become. They say you can measure a man by how he handles betrayal. I'm not sure if that's true. All I know is it crushed me, forced me to confront the darkest parts of myself. And yet here I am, upright, speaking, listening, maybe even taking a small step forward. I think about Sarah Johnson sometimes, the woman she used to be, and the woman she became. I think about David and his guilt-ridden face in that bar. Neither of them define me now. They're just echoes of a story I survived. A story that taught me one grim truth. Not every wound is visible, but it can devour you if you let it. I came close to letting it consume me entirely. But now, piece by piece, I'm building something new with the scraps. The final time I saw Sarah Johnson was in passing, a chance encounter on a city street. She was leaving a bakery, arms cradling a bag of pastries. I froze when I recognized her. She hesitated too, uncertain if she should say hello. But our gazes met, and I gave a slight nod. She looked both relieved and sad, that old guilt flickering behind her eyes. For a moment, we simply stood there as people bustled around us. The city sounds a cacophony in the background. She mouthed the word sorry, with no sound. I offered a curt nod in acknowledgement, then stepped aside and let her pass. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Some things were best left behind. That night, I sat by my window, the stone on the sill. The city was alive with sirens and car horns, but my apartment was quiet. Not the suffocating silence I once endured, but a calmer stillness, an acceptance. I lit a single lamp, took out the photograph of me and Sarah Johnson at Lake Michigan. I studied it for a long moment, recalling the warmth of that day, the excitement I once felt for our future. Then I placed it in a small box along with other items I no longer needed to carry. I put the lid on the box, sealed it with tape, and set it in my closet. I'm not burning it. I'm not throwing it away. It's just done being part of my everyday life. I turn off the lamp, letting the darkness settle in. My thoughts drift to the neighbor, Rachel, and how she laughed at my silly comment in the hallway. It feels foreign to think about someone else in a gentle way, without the weight of betrayal looming. But it's not impossible. There's a sense of finality in the air, like a chapter closed. And while the bitterness remains, it's tempered by the promise that I can still carve a new path. I'm not the same man I was before Sarah Johnson's betrayal, and I never will be. But I'm alive, and that means I have a chance to build something different, maybe better. I can't be who I was, but I can be who I am now, scars and all. So I lie down in bed, arms behind my head, listening to the faint hum of city life outside. The old me might have been anxious about tomorrow, or about being alone. But tonight, I let the quiet surround me, unafraid. Because I've stared into the heart of betrayal and survived it. The rage has done its damage, and so has the pain. Now, at last, there's room for something else, even if I'm not entirely sure what it is. All I know is that I'm not answering to Sarah Johnson's tears anymore. I've given my final no. And somewhere, beneath the ache, beneath the lingering shadows of who we used to be, I can feel a flicker of warmth at the idea that tomorrow might hold something other than heartbreak. That's enough. For now. I close my eyes, and let the darkness swallow me. The street noise rumbles on, but inside, I find a small sense of peace. I've walked away from her, from the memory, from the question of why. I don't need answers anymore. I just need to breathe and keep going. Yes, I am done. No, I do not regret it. And that is all that matters.